The year is 1939. Across Europe, a sense of foreboding hangs in the air. Cities bustle with life, but beneath the surface, anxiety simmers. The continent stands at a crossroads, its fate uncertain. Europe is a powder keg, and the fuse is burning short. Hitler's ambitions are growing bolder by the day, his speeches echoing with promises of expansion and dominance. He's already annexed Austria, bringing it under Nazi control, and dismantled Czechoslovakia, ignoring international protests. Each move emboldens him further, and the world watches with mounting dread. Britain and France, haunted by memories of the Great War's devastation, try appeasement, hoping to avoid another catastrophe. Their leaders gather in tense meetings, desperate to maintain peace, but their concessions only buy time. But Hitler's hunger for power is insatiable. He rallies his generals, planning his next move, while crowds cheer him on, swept up in a wave of nationalism and fear. Poland is next, and everyone knows it means war. In Warsaw, citizens brace for the worst, and soldiers prepare defenses, aware that the storm is about to break. In the east, Stalin watches with suspicion from the Kremlin. He weighs his options, wary of both Hitler's aggression and the West's intentions. He doesn't trust the Western democracies, suspecting they'd prefer the Nazis and Soviets to destroy each other. Diplomatic talks are tense, filled with suspicion and hidden motives. Stalin needs time to prepare for the inevitable conflict. The Red Army trains relentlessly, and Soviet industry works day and night to build up defenses. In a shocking move, Stalin's foreign minister signs the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with Nazi Germany on August 23, 1939. The world is stunned by this sudden alliance between bitter enemies. Publicly, it's a non-aggression pact, promising peace between the two powers. Newspapers around the globe scramble to make sense of the news. Secretly, it's a deal to carve up Eastern Europe. Poland split between them, the Baltics promised to the Soviets. The fate of entire nations is decided in secret rooms. For Hitler, it removes the threat of a two-front war, freeing his armies to strike west without fear of Soviet intervention. For Stalin, it buys precious time and pushes his borders west, giving the Soviet Union a buffer against the coming storm. On September 1st, German tanks roll into Poland. The Blitzkrieg is unleashed. Lightning war, fast and brutal. Cities are bombed and Polish defenses are overwhelmed. The Second World War has begun. Air raid sirens wail and civilians flee in terror as Europe is plunged into conflict once more. The world is plunged into chaos, and the uneasy alliance between two dictators sets the stage for a conflict of unimaginable scale. Old alliances crumble, and new ones are forged in desperation. The fate of millions now hangs in the balance. Families are torn apart, refugees crowd the roads, and children huddle in bomb shelters, uncertain of what tomorrow will bring. The countdown to the bloodiest front in history has started. Europe holds its breath, standing on the edge of an abyss, as night falls and the world waits for what comes next. For nearly 2 years, the Nazi-Soviet pact holds, a fragile peace maintained by mutual distrust and strategic necessity. Germany conquers the West with ruthless efficiency. Meanwhile, Stalin expands his influence in the East, redrawing borders and consolidating power. But Stalin ignores warnings. Hitler is preparing to strike, dismissing intelligence reports as mere provocations or misinformation. On June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa begins. The largest invasion in history, a colossal gamble by Hitler. Over 3 million German soldiers smash across the Soviet border, a tidal wave of men and machines. Blitzkrieg tactics devastate the Red Army, with lightning speed and overwhelming force. Soviet forces are caught off guard, unprepared for the ferocity of the assault. Planes are destroyed on the ground, communications collapse, chaos reigns as command structures disintegrate. Stalin is stunned, retreating into seclusion as disaster unfolds, grappling with the enormity of the betrayal. German armies surge, north to Leningrad, center to Moscow, south to Ukraine, each thrust aiming to cripple the Soviet heartland. Millions of Soviet soldiers are killed or captured in vast encirclements, their fates sealed by the relentless German advance. The Germans seem unstoppable, their momentum carrying them deeper into Soviet territory. But the Soviet Union is vast, with deep reserves of manpower and a will to resist that grows stronger with each passing day. Nazi brutality only strengthens Soviet resolve, turning grief into determination and anger into action. The invaders expect collapse, but instead, they awaken a nation fighting for survival, a people united in defiance. The Eastern Front becomes a war of annihilation, a brutal struggle where every inch of ground is contested fiercely. The Soviet people steel themselves for a fight to the death, ready to defend their homeland at any cost, their spirit unbroken. In the summer of 1941, the German war machine turns its full might toward the Soviet heartland, Leningrad and Moscow. These two cities, symbols of Soviet power and culture, become the main objectives of Hitler's ambitious campaign in the east. By September 1941, Leningrad is completely encircled. Hitler issues a chilling order. The city is to be starved into submission, its people left to perish rather than surrender. For nearly 900 days, the city's population faces unimaginable suffering, starvation, freezing winters, and relentless bombardment. Food rations dwindle to almost nothing, and entire families struggle to survive each bitter day. Yet Leningrad refuses to surrender. Factories continue to produce weapons, musicians perform to lift spirits, and the people endure, clinging to hope and resilience in the face of despair. Over 1 million civilians perish, but the city's spirit remains unbroken. The siege becomes a symbol of Soviet endurance and defiance. Meanwhile, Army Group Center pushes relentlessly toward Moscow. Panic and fear grip the capital as civilians evacuate and refugees flood the roads, desperate to escape the advancing enemy. But Stalin refuses to abandon Moscow. He stays in the city, rallying its defenders and citizens with a defiant speech on Red Square, inspiring hope and determination. The German advance slows to a crawl in the autumn mud, then grinds to a halt as the brutal Russian winter sets in. The invaders are unprepared for the freezing temperatures and deep snow. Ill-equipped for the cold, German troops suffer terribly. Frostbite, hunger, and exhaustion sap their strength, and morale plummets as the weather worsens. Seizing the moment, Stalin unleashes fresh Siberian divisions, elite troops hardened by harsh winters and trained for snowbound warfare. Their arrival shifts the balance. In December, the Red Army launches a fierce counterattack. Soviet soldiers, bolstered by reinforcements, push the Germans back from the very gates of Moscow. The myth of German invincibility is shattered. The world witnesses the first major defeat of Hitler's armies. The Soviet Union proves it will not fall easily. Soldiers and civilians alike show extraordinary courage and resolve. The tide of war begins to turn, as Soviet forces reclaim lost ground and the Germans are forced into retreat. Around the globe, hope is rekindled. The world sees new strength and determination rising in the east, signaling that the fight against tyranny is far from over. After failing to take Moscow, Hitler targets the south, Stalingrad and the oil fields of the Caucasus. The battle for Stalingrad becomes a brutal, close-quarters fight in a city reduced to rubble. The Soviet 62nd Army, under Chikov, clings to the city. There is no land for us beyond the Volga. German forces are drawn into a deadly urban meat grinder. Meanwhile, Soviet High Command prepares a massive counterattack. On November 19, 1942, Operation Uranus encircles the German 6th Army. Hitler refuses to allow a breakout. The promised airlift fails. Trapped, starving, and freezing, the Germans are doomed. On February 2, 1943, the last remnants surrender. Stalingrad is a disaster for Germany and a turning point for the world. The Red Army seizes the initiative. The myth of Nazi invincibility is destroyed. The tide of war flows west. The Soviet Union is now on the offensive. After Stalingrad, Hitler gambles on one last offensive, Operation Citadel at Kursk. The Soviets, forewarned, turn the Kursk salient into a fortress of trenches and mines. On July 5, 1943, the largest tank battle in history erupts. German Tigers and Panthers clash with waves of Soviet T-34S. The fighting is ferocious, but Soviet defenses hold. At Prokhorovka, hundreds of tanks battle at point-blank range. The Germans inflict heavy losses but cannot break through. Hitler calls off the attack. The last German offensive in the east has failed. The Red Army seizes the initiative for good. From now on, the Soviets are always on the attack. The Germans are in retreat, never to recover. Kursk marks the end of Nazi hopes in the east. The road to Berlin is now open. The Red Army advances relentlessly. After Kursk, the Soviets launch massive offensives, driving the Germans back. Operation Bagration in summer 1944 destroys Army Group Center, an even greater disaster for Germany than Stalingrad. The Red Army surges through Belarus and into Poland, reaching the Vistula River outside Warsaw. In August, the Polish Home Army rises against the Germans, expecting Soviet help. The Red Army halts, the uprising is crushed, Warsaw destroyed. Stalin's motives remain debated. military necessity, or political calculation. The liberation of Eastern Europe comes at a terrible cost and paves the way for Soviet domination. By spring 1945, the Third Reich is collapsing. The Red Army stands at the Oder, poised to strike Berlin. Stalin amasses overwhelming force for the final assault. On April 16, the Soviets launch a massive bombardment, breaking through the Seelow Heights. Inside Berlin, fighting is apocalyptic. Block by block, building by building, Soviet soldiers fight with vengeance and exhaustion, determined to end the war. On April 30th, Hitler commits suicide as Soviet troops close in. The red flag is raised over the Reichstag. On May 2nd, Berlin surrenders. A few days later, Germany signs unconditional surrender. The war in Europe is over. The cost is almost beyond comprehension. The Soviet victory comes at a staggering price. Around 27 million dead, most of them civilians. Cities, towns, and villages are obliterated. The land is scarred and ruined. An entire generation is decimated, families shattered, millions left orphaned or widowed. The trauma lingers for decades, shaping Soviet society. For many, victory brings no freedom. Stalin's regime remains brutal and suspicious. Returning soldiers face suspicion, some sent to the Gulag. The victory cements Stalin's power, even as it saves the nation. The cost of survival is almost unbearable. Today, the Great Patriotic War remains central to Russian identity. Victory Day is a time of remembrance and pride, honoring sacrifice and resilience. The war's memory is everywhere: parades, memorials, and family stories. Yet, the official narrative often glosses over Stalin's crimes, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and the war's darker chapters. The victory over Nazism is celebrated, but the paradox remains: a nation saved from one tyranny, only to remain under another. Can the heroism of the people be separated from the crimes of the regime? The legacy of the war, and of Stalin, still shapes Russia's soul.